Dear students, do you know what a text discourse is? How is it structured? Any set of connected or linked sentences is known as a discourse structure. The structure of a discourse can be of a written form, spoken communication, or in the form of a debate. The sentences contained in a discourse are linked to each other by components such as result, explanation, occasion, and contrast. The structure of a discourse is basically any set of connected sentences. Discourse structures take the form of written or spoken communication or debate. Sentences in a discourse are related to one another by result, explanation, elaboration, contrast, and occasion. Let us now look at various elements of the discourse analysis, which include discourses, conversations, writing, communicative events, speech, and prepositions. These are often presented in the form of sentences. The main difference between text linguistics and discourse analysis is that the latter target at revealing the sociological and psychological features of a person or people rather than focusing on the simple text structure. The analysis of discourses have been taken up as a study in various disciplines such as social sciences, education sciences, basic linguistics, anthropology, psychology, etc. Each of these subjects has their own assumptions, dimensions of analysis and several methods. The main aim of this study is to examine how textual discourses are structured, understand their basic determinants and their properties. It is also observed that textual discourses need to be examined based on topical and functional elements as well as eventualities and discourse rationale. Basic determinants of discourse. In this topic, let us see about the fundamental determinant of a text discourse. To start with, let us understand that a discourse, a lecture or a simple conversation can be condensed as having some fundamental features in common. The author and the person who reads it should possess some set of common communication goals. Among such types of discussions, part of the information is known to both the reader and the writer, some of which that the writer knows and some of which only the reader knows. However, to achieve certain goals, the author goes through a series of speech acts. This part of a discourse is considered an intentional aspect. So, what is the informational aspect of a discourse? The pattern of how the discrepancies and differences held by an author and reader unfold is known as the informational aspect of a discourse. This term can also refer to the body of shared knowledge that is built up on a proposition at a particular time. Various researchers have studied about the patterns of text discourses and they observed a lot of common patterns in the authors and readers. According to research in the natural language processing (NLP), it has benefited from the fundamental fact that text is nothing but a simple bag of words or sentences that can be arranged in a way appropriate for the situation around, but also sometimes position also holds significance. Now students, how many of you read newspaper? What do you read first? The headlines are designed to be attractive and bold to pull a reader's attention. Why do we read the headlines first? It is because it summarizes the whole news in a concise manner and in an attractive way too. As seen in the classes earlier, the position and how things are said or written gives more meaning to any discourse or writing. The other important determinants of a text discourse structure are order or the sequence matters in conveying events and the meanings. Moreover, the way in which various events are conveyed depends on how sentences and clauses are sequenced. For example, there is a lot of difference when words are arranged differently, such as I wished and my mother brought me a cup of strong coffee, and my mother gave me a cup of coffee and I wished. From this example, we can see the importance of adjacency, like what is meant to be conveyed can be twisted if the appropriate words are not adjacent or sequenced properly. On the other hand, context is always important. Most of the languages accomplish high economy through very little expressions that conveys the meaning if and only if a sentence is understood in context. The other intrinsic features of a textual discourse are the position, its order, how it is placed adjacently or not. The research on processing the discourse tries to solve these shortcomings posed by the expressions or sentences that are context bound. Properties of discourse structure. In the previous sections, we had discussed about the basis of the formalist structure and rhetorical structure and about the various elements such as eventualities of a text discourse. We had seen how these structures vary and how each of them is important to the text discourses. The basic structures or formats linked with topics, eventualities or functions have several formal properties that have resulted in automatic extracting and encoding the information received. We shall now see this importance of complexity, symmetry and coverage on this topic. Complexity refers to the task of identifying the structure through the process of segmentation, parsing or chunking. The ancient works on this discourse structure for both understanding of the text and generating it were determined to have a free structure. Let us now see a daily life example for this concept. What are recipes? How are they structured? How do you make coffee? First, we take the ingredients required for this, then we follow the process of preparing and finally how it is served. For example, take a cup of milk and boil it. Then take a mug and add coffee powder according to your flavor. To this, add the required amount of sugar and then add the boiled milk slowly and stir till the ingredients are completely dissolved. Serve it hot or cold according to your taste. Tasty coffee is ready. Such forms of writing automatically consist of various structured isomorphic, which are tree-like. According to the rhetorical structure theory (RST), the terminal nodes are projected to the elementary discourse units, whereas the non-terminals are related to a complex discourse unit with specific rhetorical relations. Coverage on the other end indicates how much percentage of a discourse belongs to the structural analysis. Let us take an example. Every component of a discourse gives a meaning or it belongs within topic segmentation. So, by understanding and identifying the segmentation, it provides a full coverage of the text. On the other hand, the structure of the discourse relations and reviewing through a process called as chunking may result in only partial coverage. Chunking is a process which helps in bringing together sections of the discourse. There are many phrases in annotating some databases like the Penn Discourse Tree Bank, including the attribution phase that is inserted in an argument to a discourse relation if the connection is between an attribution and some other argument. For example, this can be demonstrated with a contrast between various people or between two people. The second principle is the minimality principle that needs an argument to be included and to complete the inference and prediction part of a given discourse. Symmetry basically deals with the significance of the various parts of the structure of a discourse and whether the various parts have an equal weightage. According to the RST, it considers some discourse relations to be asymmetric with one of the arguments as a nucleus or the center of focus, and the other argument as its satellite. To summarize, all the three components such as complexity, coverage and symmetry of a text discourse is significant in its own way. Topic and function elements of text discourse analysis. In the previous section, we had seen the concepts of basic determinants in a text discourse and about patterns in the discourse structures also. Here, we shall see the topic and the functional elements of text discourse analysis. The primary structured text is a topic discourse. Any discourse can be classified by the topics, each of which contains a set of entities and a restricted range of things said about them. The structure of a topic is very common in the expository related text in every textbook or encyclopedias. Any topic can be categorized by the question it addresses. For example, gliders or aircraft which do not have a motor. They are sometimes called sailplanes. What defines a glider? Gliders are controlled by the pilots by using control sticks. Some gliders can only carry one person, but some gliders can carry two. In gliders with two seats, each pilot has a control stick. Gliders always have seats for the pilots. How gliders are controlled? Low-level evidence for the topic structure of discourse comes from the strong correlation between topic and vocabulary usage, which researchers called calexical cohesion. This can involve word repetition, the use of semantically related words such as hypernyms, more general terms, hyponyms, more specific terms, synonyms, terms with a similar sense, and meronyms, terms that refer to a part of a given whole, as well as the usage of words that bear more common associations such as between air and fly or aircraft and pilot. Lexical cohesion can simply be a matter of the density of related terms within a segment or of particular patterns of related terms such as vocabulary related chains defined as sequences of semantically related words. For example, consider gliders, hypernym, aircraft gliders, synonym, sailplanes, gliders, meronym, wings. Discourse can also be structured by the function served by its elements, that is, by the role in the communication. One can identify very general communicative roles or intentions, for example, assess another element in following its communicative roles, or more specific ones. For example, present a conclusion drawn from previous discourse elements. There are also communicative roles that are specific to particular genres. Example, identify the alleged offences in textual descriptions of criminal cases and present advantage of methodology in scientific research papers. In fact, one aspect of many textual genres is their conventionalized high-level functional structure. The pattern of news reports is a good example of this. The functions served in their conventionalized inverted pyramid structure comprise: 1. A summary of who is involved, what took place, when and where it took place, why it happened, and optionally how, all found in a primary paragraph. Number 2. A sequence of paragraphs that provide more details about these points in the body, and number 3, less important information presented in a final. Another example is the structure in which eventualities and the spatio-temporal relations are presented in text traditionally in the chronological order. Departures from this convention produce very striking effects, as in films such as Memento and Betrayal, where scenes appear in reverse chronological order. Eventualities and discourse relational elements of text discourse. Any discourse is framed by various eventualities such as descriptions of events and the states and the relations with the spatio-temporal elements. Such structures can be generally observed in new reports or magazine articles, the procedure section of a scientific paper in a journal, in medical reports of accidents, and very commonly in narrative paragraphs. The two devices used for structuring discourses are topics and functions. Although certain eventuality patterns may be traditional, the protagonist of a narration is addressed usually with an interdiction. In this case, the protagonist or the hero is asked to do something. Let us consider cases in which the violation of the interdiction happens and the hero has to do the actions, or the hero leaves back home in pursuit of a search or an adventurous journey. The third possibility is that the hero is attacked and this paves an introduction for the helper or the survivor. In the earlier years, researchers were interested in studying either the linear or hierarchical structuring of the narrative text. These types of texts were presented as story schemata or story grammars. These kinds of scripts were created in order to fill the gaps in such stories or answer queries about the stories. Every discourse too has a low level structure that links to the discourse relations and holds between the semantic content or two units of a text discourse. Each probably contains one or more sentences or even clauses. The relations could be between the acts of speech in one, the semantic base content in the other. What is semantic content? According to literature, it is a proposition, an event, a situation or a fact. Relations of discourses can be explicitly expressed by extensively used discourse connectives. For example, such as the kite was created in China about 2800 years ago. Later it spread into other Asian countries like India, Japan and Korea. However, the kite only appeared in Europe by about the year 1600. Here, the adverbial later expresses a succession relation between the event of creating kites and that of kites spreading to other Asian countries, while the adverbial however expresses a contrast relation between the spread of kites into other Asian countries and the spread into Europe. One can consider each of this a higher order predicate argument structure with the discourse connective conveying the predicate with two abstract objects expressing its arguments. Such relations in causes or text based discourses can be triggered implicitly through the process of adjacency while uttering such as clouds are heavy. This sentence, however, intends to mean that the water content in the cloud might weigh several million tons. In this example, the first type of utterance means the clouds are literally heavy by its mass. On the contrary, the second utterance attributes the weight or the mass of the cloud to the water content containing by the clouds. These kinds of utterances could be used in cases of narrative essays or in dramatic plays where twisting the utterances could attract the audience to interpret the play in their own manner. Formalist versus rhetorical approach to discourse. The recognition and the classification of different forms of discourse is largely dependent on the nature or notion or genre. According to folklorists and literary scholars, it is seen that the definite features of speech events and written forms are classified to identify the universal types of form. The aim such research measures is to establish making taxonomies and typologies associated with universal types of form. Such efforts have been classified as generic or formalistic forms of text discourse. Such text discourses made efforts to present a basic story structure using distinct well-established patterns which are to be differentiated from other forms. According to some authors, the use of a formalist approach helps in establishing a set of criteria which will determine the boundaries between different extended discourses. The use of such an approach has the advantage of presenting rigorousness with regards to variations in structure. Such variations can be used to describe and determine the types of text discourse. However, some researchers do not agree with such an approach to text discourse. These researchers indicate that while the formalist approach can be used to describe the nature of the fixed texts like literature, document studies, etc., it cannot be used to describe everyday spontaneous text discourse. The use of a formalist approach often overlooks the presence of interactive functions between different discourse structures. The primary contention behind the promotion of a formalist approach is that textual discourses are organized texts and hence need not account for spontaneous text patterns. The other author branch promotes the idea that defining genres mainly on the basis of the structural features is a misguided effort. These authors promoted a rhetorical approach. The formalist tradition is challenged due to the neglect of the communicative branch associated with text genres. In the rhetorical approach, all discourse types including narratives are considered as parts of interactional sense-making situations. Such situations are sued to emphasize discourses as communicative events. Bauman et al. Suggested the use of storytelling as an example of rhetorical approach to text discourses. The authors claim that by adapting a rhetorical approach as opposed to formalist approach, it is possible to avoid using previously established criteria for generic boundaries. This will help in the identification of the socio-pragmatic features associated with textual discourses. Godwin further supported this theory by adapting an interactional positioning strategy towards textual discourses. The authors examined the storytelling patterns of African American literature by giving focus on both social and interactional functions of narratives. By identifying how the pattern of text are written by children across ages and genders, the author established some differences. Furthermore, according to the authors, by examining naturally occurring stories, we can see how narrative structure is related to the participation structure of the movement and current social projects. Therefore, it is concluded that there can be two different forms of approaches to the establishment of discourses. These include formative and rhetorical. Formative is useful for more detailed approaches, while the rhetoric is useful for spontaneous text discourses and storytelling. It is important for every author to find words that will hit the right connotations for the text readers rather than randomly finding words to express their ideas. However, such actions indicate that the writer needs to know about the reader's thought processes. This ensures that the author has understood and can interpret the context of the reader. Typically, an author goes beyond finding just any set of words to express ideas. An author searches for the words which will create appropriate connotations for the readers of the text. This implies that an author needs to know something about a reader's thoughts, including background of experience and interest. It implies that the author has recommended and can predict the reader's context. It suggests that all these aspects interact back and forth, affects and is also affected by the production of text. In all, it suggests that what have been labeled as text tendencies, example, the explicit and implicit ideas, relationships between ideas, structural features, cohesion and stylistic qualities are restricted by an author's perceptions of an audience, an author's perceived goal for a text, an author's ability to appreciate the effect of a text upon an audience and the mode and conditions of publication. We have examined the basic behind textual discourse. It is proposed that the adoption of any textual discourse would follow either formalist or rhetoric in nature. The structure is made up of topical, functional, discourse and eventuality related components and is used to understand the nature of textual discourses. Finally, whatever style is being followed, it is the effectiveness of the communication from the author to the reader which matters. Thank you.